Hey there. Welcome to the Pelvis Project podcast. I'm Megan.
And I'm Roxy. We're two pelvic health experts brought together by passion for our careers, entrepreneurship, motherhood, and the desire for intentional relationships.
Join us in our mission to spread pelvic floor awareness and start conversations surrounding the truth behind genuine health, imperfect wellness, and joyfully navigating life. We are so glad you are here with us.
Let's start the conversation.
Okay, we are back for episode number 2 with Lauren Scafe. If you missed part 1, we want you to pause here, go back to our last episode and take a listen to that one. It has a lot of great information. We talked a lot about desire and what that can mean and all the different levels of that. So go pause, check out episode 1, and then come back. And on this episode, we're going to be doing a Q&A. We had some questions submitted. We have questions for her, and you don't want to miss any of it. So we hope you enjoy part 2 as much as you did part 1. Here we go. Okay, well, we are going to jump into this will be fun. We posted a question box on social media for people to put in some questions for Q&A. And so we are going to try to answer some of those. And I think this will be very helpful because our first episode will talk a lot about low desire, but we had a lot of questions about low desire. So our first one is low desire, very fleeting moments of interest are my battle. So talk into that a little bit, Lauren. I know in our first episode that would have aired a couple weeks ago, we talk a lot about low desire, but as she talks about these fleeting moments of interest, so very short-lived.
Yeah. So I guess I would really encourage somebody, to really examine those fleeting moments. When you have that fleeting moment, what was happening? What were the turns that were happening? What were, when the moments are, when you're not feeling desire, what's turning on your brakes and what's turning on your accelerators? It's more important actually to identify what your brakes are than what your accelerators are in terms of figuring out how to have a little bit more desire, and really just that baseline understanding that everybody has a different type of desire and one is not better than the other. They're just simply different. And if you can understand that you need responsive desire, great. Then what do you need to experience desire? Is it simply a willingness? Is it, I always tell people too, pay attention to your 5 senses. What turns you on: sight, smell, touch, feel, all those things. Really pay attention to what helps get you, even interested in thinking about having some desire.
That's really good. I have so many thoughts just when you said that. And then like that whole communication, be able to tell your partner, maybe it's like, I need you to take the trash out every night. That will help my desire.
Yeah.
No, that's very good.
Let's add to that. Like, I need you to see that the trash needs to be taken out without me telling you to take out the trash.
Yes. That takes it to a whole nother level. That's going to be, that's real hot when they can do that. I love it. I remember, this is kind of a personal funny story, but early in my marriage, it's like, my husband and I had been together for a long time before we were married, knew each other really well, but we didn't live together before we were married and we were young. And so we get married, and I think we were married for about a year. We moved into our house, and I started noticing that and my husband's really helpful, but early on, when we were younger, I started noticing this, he wasn't doing as much. And then I remember we got in this little argument, and I was kind of like, you want to know what'll turn me on? You take out the trash or something like that. I did. And then I tell you what, that was years ago. We've been married for almost 19 years. I've never had to bring it up again.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think though too, on a little bit more, I genuinely have people really deconstruct their relationship. And I tell people, if you feel like a mother to your partner, you can't also be their lover.
Oh, that's good.
I want to be your lover and not your mother. So I need you to be a whole ass adult on yourself so that I can do that and not have in my case, I don't want a fifth child. I need an equal partner.
Yes, I'm writing this down.
But I to women in particular about that, like, you are not broken for having low desire. You have a partner who is not showing up as a willing participant in all of the things, and your desire matches his effort. But women take on that they are the broken one. And that is the thing that, like, ooh, that gets me hot. I'm like, okay, let's deconstruct that.
Yes. Ah, that's so good. I feel like we need to have that landing on all of our pages after this. We're going to make sure that that Emily puts that on a I want to be your lover, not your mother.
Yep.
Lauren Scafe. Lauren Sex Cafe. Love it. Oh, very good. Okay. So one of our other questions was, how can I try and tighten up after having babies? And I have lots, I know, I'm sure Roxy, I think all three of us probably have some thoughts on this for many reasons, but I would load a lot more questions into this. So Roxy, do you want to speak into this first? And we can all kind of like give our little, which by the way, I mean, this is a question that is on a lot of women's minds because we, again, society has been like, you have this baby and now your parts are all stretched out and you've got this like quote unquote like loose vagina. And then that layers on all sorts of feelings about our bodies. So Roxy, you want to take
Sure.
that and then we'll kind of all.
I think it's more of just like pressing into that and some deeper questions of saying like, okay, when does it feel loose? Like, is it during intimacy or is it just during walking around, or like what is going on at the, like what's prompting that, or what are the feelings that are happening with that?
Yeah. And is it actually that, or do you just assume it is?
Yes.
And most of the time it's not.
Or is it like, I mean, I think even just like if someone's prolapsed, then they're going to feel things and then they're loose, and really that might not be the case. And so I think that's just one of the like first things I'm wondering of like, what's loose? Like who's defining that? Where's that coming from? And and then even, I mean, kind of going into the body image of like, okay, is that a problem?
Right.
That's kind of, I guess, where my first wonder, my first question, follow up, and kind of just the idea behind that of like, what's loose? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Like and then usually I feel like then going into there are some things in like their sex life that maybe, are different, and they might just be different, and so kind of pressing into some of those questions.
Well, and I think like when you have a question like that, obviously without like having a conversation with somebody of finding out, okay, where is that coming from? Are you having actual signs of that? Most of the time we can say what we find is it's the opposite. Most of the time people have too much tension afterwards. So I think we need to tighten up, but in fact, we're actually either need to be working more on just general mobility through the pelvic floor. I just think that with that, it's hard to answer specifically because to me, I'm like, well, what does that mean? And what are symptoms? Because it could be that like, you're not having any symptoms at all. And it just feel like you just think because of you've had a baby, it means you need to tighten up. And we do get questions where women are concerned that after they have a baby, it's going to feel different to their partner. And then that brings on a whole nother thing. So Lauren, let's speak into this.
I'm like chomping at the bit here.
I know. Because like we get that question, we're like, okay, so we're going to tackle it more from like, are there some muscular skeletal things? Are there symptoms of prolapse? Are there symptoms of leaking? Is there this thing? But then if that's all okay, then it leads to some more information. So go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So who told you were loose?
Yeah, exactly.
Are we talking about the quote unquote husband stitch? Where is this coming from? To which we could go down multiple rabbit holes. Let's talk about, I mean, immediately my brain is thinking about just this whole, I'm going to call it like wellness industry that pushes women to believe that we are never enough, that somehow we've given birth and now our body is still not right, that in some way we need to fix ourselves for our partner's pleasure. Also, I think this goes into this idea of the Virgin and the Madonna, right? Like, you need to be sexual, but not so sexual that now you are, we've all seen people or experienced or at least like absorbed it in some way, this concept of like slut shaming, right? Where like if you've had X amount of partners, you're loose, but men don't take on that same issue, right? Like no matter how many partners they have, nobody says, "Oh, did your penis get smaller?" Like that's not a thing. And so I think really deconstructing these narratives around women and who we're allowed to be and who we're supposed to be, and particularly in motherhood, I've really been thinking about sexuality and motherhood. Like, can you be all of the things? Can you be mother? Can you still want sex? Can you still, what does all of this mean? And I think just being like very curious about where so many of these expectations come from and who wants it. Like if a woman wants it for herself,
Yes.
great. More power to you. You have that autonomy to say something doesn't feel right to me and I don't like it. Great. Something doesn't feel right to my husband. Okay, let's unpack that. Let's really kind of unpack that and talk about that a little bit more.
Yes. When you talked about the wellness industry and kind of this like that we're not enough or we need to fix something, I think something that really I can tend to get on a soapbox for because, and let me just say this. Well, let me talk about it and then I'll give a little caveat here because I don't think there's anything wrong if you're doing something for yourself. That's totally fine. But this industry of in our world, we're starting to see these devices come out that it's like, you know, thousands of dollars to insert a device to, tighten the vagina or like make it look younger or improve the look of your vulva. And okay, in some situations, fine. But if we're trying to sell this as, and, showing before and afters of the labia or the vulva, all that is doing from the aspect of what we see and what women are struggling with is screaming at them, you need to make that look better. That's not
Yeah.
okay. And that's
Yeah.
how we're like that. Vulvas look different across the board, and I think that's another thing for women to understand is it does not look like it does in pictures. You are not broken if it looks different. And it's concerning that we are pushing like, and again, if this is something important to you, then by all means, but don't do it because you're afraid that your husband is or your partner is like not like happy with how things look. I don't know. It's hard. It's heartbreaking.
It's hard because it also goes back to sex education too, right? Of showing and telling people like, hey, I don't expect you to know this, but the vulva's on the outside and the vagina's on the inside, which we can't even seem to get right in mass media, as maybe we all saw just recently.
Yeah.
But also the fact that like, and guess what? They all look different because not everything. And if your sex education is coming from porn, you're going to think it should all look a certain way. And that's just simply not the truth.
Yeah.
All our faces are different.
That's right.
And our vulvas are different too.
Our earlobes are different.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, I'm glad that question got asked because it does take us down just so many preconceived, and that's like the bounce back culture after having babies, and that's a whole nother thing too. So, okay.
Sure.
Let's see here. We had a couple that were just like fun little like We had another one for low desire. So I think we've chatted about that. So scar tissue after tubal ligation, or basically like a removal of a fallopian tube, and super painful periods for a long period of time post-op was one of our questions. And yeah, so this was like 6 months plus post-op of painful periods. So as far as that goes, as far as the question, I mean, obviously these are, you feel like you just want to dive in and ask this person more things. But if we're diving into this of having, you've had this procedure, and then we think about, so recently I did a course that was like visceral mobilization, which is basically getting deep into the abdominal wall to mobilize organs. Because when our organs are not moving the way that they should with other fascial tissue or other organs, if they are adhesed because of scar tissue, then they slowly and quietly start to not function at their optimal capacity. And so then we don't know that until we start having issues. And so if the question is leading, like, what do I do about this? There are things that can be done to help with that. And then super painful periods. Roxy and I were kind of talking about this ahead of time of, I think that's another huge thing that women have been kind of like led to believe. It's like, oh, sorry, you've got these painful periods and you bleed heavy. Like your only option is to go on birth control. And the more and more we're learning is that we actually can have quite a big, like, that's not okay. We should not have painful periods. That is, I mean, we should be able to like have our cycle, have a little bit of cramping, and be able to continue our day. But if we're having to not, like, if we're missing work and we're lying in bed because of it, like, there's more investigation that we can do. So Roxy, I don't know if you want to speak, go ahead and speak more into that.
Yeah, I think kind of segueing off what you said of just saying, one, that's not normal. And remembering, like, coming back to this, that our menstrual cycle is a vital sign. And so when that is rearing its head, then we have to ask, why is that? It's not just coincidence. It's not unlucky. It's not like, oh, my mom's period was like this or my sister's is like this, so this is just how it's supposed to be. And we don't want to normalize that by any means. And so I think that can go a lot of ways. I mean, as a pelvic health practitioners, we know musculoskeletally, we work on restriction, we work on circulation, we work on all of that, but we have to appreciate then also there's like a hormonal aspect. And if we are going to dive into the hormone side, then we are going to look at like stress, or we are going to look at like what else is going on here, or what are some other things that we can help to optimize that.
Yeah. And with we know too, if we go, when we're dealing with somebody that might be coming in having really heavy, painful periods, which we do find that is something that people come in and mention, but that might not be their primary diagnosis. But then their period pain gets better as we're working on all the general pelvic health issues that they might be coming in for. But diving into how's your sleep, how's your stress, how's your nutrition, how are all these things, because that all plays a role in how our body's responding. And then also in that, I will speak into the biggest thing with that is if you are somebody that have had some sort of procedure and you don't feel right afterwards, and this has gone on and you've gone back to your doctor and they're like, well, everything looks okay, just give it more time. I think the biggest thing in that is, you know your body the best. We are the advocates for our body. And if that does not sit well, and and you're intuitively that there's something else going on, I would encourage you to get a second opinion. If it has to do with something like this, find a pelvic floor therapist, like somebody that is going to sit down and further investigate it with you, because there's something there. And the longer that it's there, we start to lay down, we get the pain science and the pain patterns, and the body starts to respond differently in all areas. And so then we have this heightened, like the spotlight's turned on all the time for any pain. Goodness. So many things. But okay, Lauren, which I think this is so great, because these questions, it's like from both aspects, somebody can get help.
Okay. The thing that I'm thinking about, and I had to write down all of my I had some thoughts and I had to like write them out because, and this may be a really, really weird aside that maybe like one person listening to this follows where I'm going with this, but I just want to say it. I think that when you were talking about periods and birth control, the thing that flagged in my brain is how overwhelming I think social media is with this kind of stuff right now. Because I think if we're going to go back to this idea of wellness culture and sort of more like capitalism and women's health, I think that right now women's health is being marketed as ways for people to make money, right? So like there is a little bit of fear mongering, I feel like, going on with, your periods and birth control and menopause. I have noticed that perimenopause and menopause has become the new way for people to market their business, to say that they're an expert in it, sell a course on information that we all just need to be super discerning of who we are getting our information from and what are their, what is their education. I'm not trying to be gatekeepers of education, but I just think we are all being very inundated with a ton of information. And it is just very important to have media literacy, to be able to say, I trust this person when it comes to health. I trust that they know what they're talking about, because there is a lot of content to weed through.
Absolutely. There is. Oh gosh, I know. I just had this conversation with somebody else too. Oh God, we could go into another realm too of when we talk about like babies and tongue ties and this whole
Yeah.
like just feeling like, oh gosh, am I not doing enough? And this feeling like there's like, it comes back to like, just know where you're getting your information from. And I think it is cool because we are going to be seeing more information, I think, in women's health, because we are starting to see a trend of we're paying attention more and we're trying to do better. But because of that, you do unfortunately have individuals that are trying to just jump on, and it's just not, maybe they did a weekend course and suddenly they're saying they're a certified expert in it. And so absolutely, I think it's very good to point out, because I know Roxy and I, as far as like in our world goes, like we have people that those are our people that we trust and we learn from, and they're doing the research and their feet are on the ground doing it. And that's where we're going. I'm not going to be taking advice from a reel that I saw from from somebody. So anyway, that was good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just had to have that little
Caveat.
plug.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Good call. Okay. And then let's see here. We had a question that just says hemorrhoids. And from our Roxy, you want to take this one from a pelvic floor standpoint?
Yeah. Usually hemorrhoids are caused by like a struggle or a discrepancy in our intra-abdominal pressure management. And so if you're constipated or you're straining or your core isn't working well, then we adopt different compensatory patterns to stabilize our body. And so instead of using our core and our core engaging really well and our pelvic floor engaging well and having this really beautiful support system that's within our body innately, then we start to do other things. And a lot of times those other patterns then put tons of pressure downward. And so when you're lifting and standing and just doing things all day long, then that pressure's downwardly focused. Or if you're constipated and you're straining, it's that same idea, that pressure is downwardly focused. And then we strain the vasculature down there and boom, hemorrhoids. So usually it's not a problem necessarily with the muscles themselves, although they could coincide with that. It is usually, though, like a coordination issue of maybe the muscles work well, but in these movements, they aren't stepping up and actually doing their job. Or maybe the muscles aren't working well. And, but it's really looking for that why and understanding why do we have it? So we have a hemorrhoid. Why do we have a hemorrhoid? I would also speak into cyclically, though, our tissue is a little more friable in certain times of the month or certain seasons of like pregnancy or postpartum too. And so we have to appreciate also the tissue integrity in that area and how our body is navigating or how resilient it is to like a bowel passing by it. And if it's a little more vulnerable, then it's going to tear a little easier. And so it might not be that we're constipated. All of a sudden we just have blood in our stool. We're like, what in the world, But if you're pregnant or if you're in a certain time of the month, then that can definitely be flaring that. A lot of times, though, we ask, though, is like, why was it there in the first place? And that kind of comes down to biomechanics. So,
yeah. And then speaking into, with all these questions that we've had here leading up to this, so like hemorrhoids, and we think about like hemorrhoids can be painful. And then the previous question with like a post-op procedure, and then like you're having discomfort and pain. And now you're having these like questions about what's going on. And then that gets layered to I'm having pain. Am I broken? Is this going to ever go away? And then that can lead to difficulty, and so then I think that leads into you, Lauren, of
yeah. I was gonna say, but think I wouldn't have something to say about hemorrhoids, but
you do.
Because it makes me think about, and this is sort of where my own personal story with sex therapy and pelvic floor management and why do you do what you do, but is the idea of like, you do think that there's something wrong because maybe there's leaking, maybe there's pain, maybe you all of a sudden randomly, and maybe I'm saying this out of personal experience, have 5 crowns because you're grinding your teeth and you have TMJ, and then your pelvic floor physical therapist is like, hey, you have a ton of stress and you're actually hypertonic in your pelvic and you have TMJ and you're grinding your teeth. And we really need to take a holistic approach to what's happening here. Right. And so I think this also is like, what people don't understand is like there's a whole mental aspect to the management of painful sex too. And I think this is why if you have access to it, not everybody does, but if you can put together a team of people to help support you through this, you can see how we are not individual parts, right? Like we cannot separate what's happening in our jaw from what's happening in our pelvic floor to what's happening in our sex life. It's all connected. Just one thing I want to say that's completely like not related, but I just don't want it to be a miss, is that with purity culture, I think it can be very confusing for people why they would have painful sex without something happening. And this, and what we see is when you have a more sex negative message, your brain doesn't know what to do with all of that. And then all of a sudden you have painful sex. And so I think that's very, very confusing for people. But I send a lot of folks with purity culture kind of deconstruction to pelvic floor PT so they can get access to dilators and all of this to understand like this is all connected. It's weird and confusing, but it's all connected and there's no shame in it. We really want to help support you through that. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. It's so good. And God, speaking to that too, when it comes to like dilators or vaginal trainers, that in and of itself is overwhelming for people. And so I would just encourage somebody if they like went to their GYN who in meaning to do well and help sent you home with the dilator set, but didn't send you to then go have somebody guide you through those. That's kind of a recipe for I don't want to say recipe for disaster because I don't want to make it like it, but it's you've got to have somebody there because there's so many. Those are just not something you just insert. Like you need to be walk through like some certain steps and different things. And like there's a reason why most of the time that's something that is a guided kind of like exposure.
Sure, because I think all of a sudden then it's really easy to go down this rabbit hole of, kind of shame and negative thinking. And that like, was I supposed to know what to do with this too?
Yes.
Like and educated about this?
Yeah.
When no, not supposed to know what to do. Somebody should have walked you through that, and I think that can be super overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Or even I have a patient right now I'm working with, and oncologist handed her a dilator. And so she felt broken that the treatment didn't even work. Like she couldn't even handle the treatment. You know what I mean? Like, here, use this, it'll help you. But she couldn't even use that. And it was like, well, this is supposed to be my lifeline. This is supposed to be the treatment. And I'm too broken for that. And so just that, like, even like what made the oncologist feel like that size even was supposed to be what she was supposed to have, and yeah, it's an easy fix. Like we just have to do it the right way. It's not too complex. Like no one's too complex. You're just maybe not getting help in the right place.
Yeah. Well, hey, I would love to do this again with more Q&As, but we are going to wrap this up. And Lauren, when we finish, we like to throw some rapid fire questions at our guests, so we'll be fun. But before we do that, anything before we wrap up that you want to speak to or feel like you want to make sure that we touch on?
Let's see. Like, I guess when I try to sum this up, I think about like the things that are so important. Lube is normal and great and good.
Yes.
Pleasure is the measure and nothing else. And your pleasure matters. And if you have a question about it, I can guarantee you somebody else does, let's just continue to normalize the conversation around sex because it's really, really important. And we have to continue to kind of destigmatize the shame. So.
Yes. So good. Such good words of wisdom to finish up with. Okay. So let's see here. Okay. These will be easy. What's your favorite time of the day?
Oh, it depends on if it's a day that I'm working or a day that I have off. If it's a day that I have off, I would say that my favorite time of day is when I wake up a little bit early and nobody else is up and I have a cup of coffee and a book that I really want to read and the house is quiet and I can just completely be to myself.
I love it. And what about your work day?
I don't know. That is like...
Okay, so here's another one that kind of goes along that. What's your favorite day of the week?
Oh, I guess I would probably have to say I get the Sunday scaries at night, but I love Sunday morning. It's always like lay in bed and have a cup of coffee. And it feels like there's no guilt in that, which, somebody unpack that for me. But yeah, I would say
Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I like that. And let's see here. Are you a coffee or tea drinker?
Oh, coffee. Way too much.
Black or cream in it?
Just the tiniest drop of cream. I think it's like
really?
Cream, and that's about it.
You're like hardcore.
Yeah, and I've also moved into heavy cream because I like it, and I'm like, I don't have to drink anything skim. I want like the heaviest cream. Damn it!
Stuff is good.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then last thing would be, what's your biggest piece of advice for intimacy?
My biggest piece of advice for intimacy, if it's in a partnered relationship, is to focus on finding somebody who feels safe, somebody that you're safe to be vulnerable with, somebody that you're safe to connect with, somebody that you're safe to feel seen, heard, and loved by.
Love it. Okay. And then one more thing. Why don't you share with our listeners where they can find you as far as like social media and that sort of thing?
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Lauren Scafe Therapy. It is not Lauren's Cafe, but you can, and then I do have a website. It's www.laurenescafe.com. But then you can also find me at Flourish. Our website there is flourish-ict.com and also the same on Instagram. So 2 places.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this awesome 2-part interview. And we can't wait to do it again. I'm sure we'll have you on again with lots of other topics.
Thank you for having me. Very much appreciated.
Awesome. Very good.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Pelvis Project podcast. Help us continue the conversation by liking and sharing this episode with friends. And if you really want to do us a solid, leave us a review. If you'd like to follow us on social, check out the show notes for links. And remember, this week, take a deep breath and relax your pelvic floor.